What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and today we are going to talk about skill trees. We're going to go over 3 different skill trees, DPS or catch-all, a Psi-oriented skill tree, as well as a tanking skill tree. So it should cover all the basics of what you would need, especially from a starting position. Now you can always tweak these depending on your needs and what exactly you're building around and your preferences. So this is just what I am running on my 3 main kind of characters that run these different roles. Before we jump into it, I'd like to say thank you again to all the supporters of the channel, everybody that subs and likes and comments on these videos. It's extremely helpful to me. I also want to announce that I did start a Patreon page, and I encourage you guys to check that out. There's a couple different tiers of support, which would help me out quite a bit in moving the channel forward, especially with some of the new gear and things that are coming out. That would help me out quite a bit if you are so inclined. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into it. So what we're going to start with is my main character. Now, this particular character, I have set up in a way to where I can pretty much do anything with it. Now, the main focus is a DPS oriented character, so mainly run torpedo kinetic builds, cannon scatter volley, and sometimes we'll do beam overload. This particular build's actually kind of a tank fire at will DPS kind of slash build. It's kind of a weird one, but the way that I've set this up is really kind of a catch-all skill tree, to where I even have a science build on a ship, a couple ships, and I can run science on it. Now, adjusting the skill tree specifically for science, we would be able to do a little bit better, get a little bit more out of it. But this more than gets the job done. So if you only have, one character or 2, or, whatever it may be, having one character is really, I mean, there's a couple different, ways to look at it, right? If you have multiple characters, you can grind out more resources, dilithium, things like that. But if you want to build them up to in-game status and those kinds of things and progress, it gets very expensive with, ships, especially if, you're relying on lockbox ships or lobby ships, those kinds of things, where they're not account unlocked. So in a lot of cases, what people will do is they'll have, multiple toons that are more for farming, and then you just have your main toon, okay? And if your main toon, you want to kind of do everything or lean more towards DPS, but still be able to tank, do science, this would be the skill tree that I would recommend. Let's go ahead and get to that. All right, here we go. And so we'll go through it here. So as you'll be able to tell right away, it is, obviously DPS oriented, right? And so, I mean, if you look at the tactical side, it's basically maxed out. I maxed everything out in this because it is all useful, with the exception really of the defense maneuvering. In PvP, this matters because you have basically your accuracy to defense ratio makes a difference in that setting. In PvE content and TFOs, those kinds of things, it does not make any difference. I don't care what anybody says. This defensive rating does not make a difference. And to be frank, I don't think accuracy does either. But we needed to put enough points into this to max out our tactical bar here, so we can get all the perks here for Focus Fury. So we've been able to take all 3 of the perks that you get by filling this completely in. So tactical. So let's talk science. Science from a tactical standpoint mainly is going to be this leg right here, and what this is long-range targeting. So if you don't fill any of this in, there's a damage decrease that you get at range, right? So when you go to attack a target, you got to get within 10 kilometers. Well, if you're just within 10 kilometers, 9.5, your attacks are not going to be doing the full potential damage that's listed in your tooltip. So there's a damage reduction over distance. The closer you get, the more damage you do. As you pick up these points, this reduces that diminishing damage at range. So max damage penalty, negative 40%, and it goes up from there, 30, and all the way down to 20. So this is extremely helpful for any kind of DPS build at all. I don't know that this affects science. abilities. I don't see why it would. That'd be kind of weird. But let me know in the comments if it does. But it certainly obviously affects, you know, all your other kind of projectile, energy weapons, those kinds of things. So you're definitely going to want to take this. Next, I have filled in exotic particle generation, and this is a kind of a part of the catch-all. So this allows me to be able to do science if I want to. It also helps with torpedo builds and some of those things, because a lot of times they're kind of a mixture. So it's torpedo oriented, but there's also a little bit of science mixed into that. And having the EPG fully maxed out helps with those torpedo DPS builds, but it also gives you the capability to be able to run a science build on a character like this if you would like, which I do. And so lastly, in science, I also take control. Same kind of a thing. The way I run my main torpedo build that I enjoy on the Janeway is a science ship. I also have control mixed in with that, and so I take control because it kind of augments that DPS build that I prefer. And it also allows me to also do science. If this was a pure science build, we'd also take like improved control expertise, maybe some of the drain and drain infection potentially, but we'll take a look at that when we get over to the science. Lastly, on engineering, we are going maximum on our hull capacity. This gives us just a larger hit points pool. This also helps with things like Tyler's duality and other things that scale off of your hit points. So this also translates into more critical chance when running Tyler's duality, which is a reputation trait that you can get by progressing through the reputation system. Next, I go full boat also into impulse expertise. As if you're familiar with any of my videos, especially beginner's guides, all those, I like to go fast. I like to be able to maneuver around the map. I like to get to where I want to be, point the direction I want to point, and maxing this out is going to help you with that. So I go full boat on impulse here. Next, on the Lieutenant Commander level here, we are using the Electroplasma System flow. So this is giving us additional transfer rate. So if you're coming out of full impulse, you're transferring power levels around, this will allow that to go faster. And this improves that flow here as well. So this is giving us additional 100 skill points, which is basically 100% bonus transfer. And so again, that helps, when you're coming out of full impulse or out of cloak or, any kind of movement in your power system down here. All right, next, hull plating. I still keep a point in this. It gives us, basically more resistance is what this is doing. If you find, especially, because a lot of what keeps me alive is being able to do just tons of damage where I can destroy things quickly, or using other traits and things like that starts to buff either instant regens of hit points or a buildup of resistance rating. If you're on the newer mid-tier kind of levels, you might want to put a couple points into this. So maybe, if you're newer, you may not need to start off, you probably aren't going to dabble in science. So what I would probably do, to start with, and you can always re-roll this later if you do decide to go with science, but take these, 3 points and maybe 4, and you can fill in the additional immunized hull plating and ablative hull plating. And this will give you a nice big base, line chunk of resistance. Resistance is survivability. It's huge. And you're going to want that. So if I wasn't going to do science at all with this, and this wasn't a catch-all, I would be using these science points into immunized hull plating and the ablative plating here. And then I'd probably put the rest maybe in defensive subsystem and maybe one here, or maybe if I was using like, I don't know, photonic officer for my cooldown, I would put it into maybe science readiness or something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and keep moving along here. So I have another 3 points into the offensive subsystem tuning. So this is giving us additional power down here into our subsystems. So it's giving us a base of for the weapons and for the engines. So it's giving us more damage output, more movement at plus 4.8 weapons damage, and then we're getting another boost of the plus 3.2 for our weapons and another 3.2 to the engines. So that pretty much covers it. I mean, you can kind of read through what each of these little things do, and all of these have a purpose. It's not like we just filled them in just to boost this all the way up. But having, you know, getting it to this level and not spending more than you need to on things that don't matter, you know, that's important. You only get so many skill points here. So this is a good catch-all if you want to kind of be able to dabble in anything that you want to, and it work very well. So DPS, no problem. You're going to kill it. You can tank with this. There are some tweaks you can make for tanking for sure. Science, there's definitely some tweaks you can make. So we would call this a catch-all, but it's leaning towards heavy DPS. You can still do everything else. So let's talk about these points down here at the bottom. And I pretty much picked the same thing for everything. So this is going to be the same. So we'll just go over this part for this first one here. So let's see if it's going to show me what I picked. Oh, am I highlighting over the wrong ones? I am. Okay. So as you pick so many points, you'll get to these little markers here where you can make a selection. So hanger health or battery expertise. So I go with battery expertise. This is giving us a 100%. Let's see here, battery and device effects by 100%. Okay, so it increases the duration of most batteries. So it's basically doubling the amount of time that, say, like an energy weapons battery lasts, or a kinetic battery is what this does. Next on this row here, I went with subsystem repair. So this is providing an extra plus 50. Resistance to duration of subsystem offline. So the way I understand this is if you get, you know, hit by something by the Borg, or like the Iconians especially, and they shut down something in your subsystems, this adds to the skill rating that will reinitialize that subsystem faster. All right, let's jump down to science. So there was only one to select in here, and on this one I increased the maximum sector speed. So this is basically your warp speed is base extra 25%. So if you're going to do tour of the galaxy, things like that, this will definitely help you get around faster. All right, down for the tactical, I am going with threat control. This is a real important one here. So this helps quite a bit. So you're plus 100% additional threat generation while threatening stance is activated, or negative 100% threat generation, which is, you know, when threatening stance is not activated, which is it's not activated by default. You have to turn it on in your tray. That's huge. So that makes a big difference of, you know, how much the enemy is going to pay attention to you at any given time. So I would definitely go with the threat control over your hanger pet weapons. On both projectile and for the energy weapons, I go with the critical damage, so crit D. Same thing here. For our energy weapons, I'm going with the crit damage as opposed to the crit chance. Here we're going with accuracy rating. Like I said, accuracy, in my opinion, is not making a big difference whatsoever. I don't care what anybody says. Defense is definitely not making a big difference. If you're building towards PvP, this is the wrong video, and these things will make a difference in that. So I don't want to say like the mechanic is dead, it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't do anything when you're playing NPCs. So I went with accuracy because I don't know, it makes me feel better because I know defense doesn't make any difference. And then lastly, you don't have a choice here. This just activates this final ability. This gives you a clicky that you can click on, and then as you fill in the next 3, you'll be able to select. So let's say you only got 3 into it, you could pick 2 of any of these 3 items here. So by filling it all out, you get all of it. All right, so that covers our catch-all / DPS skill tree. Let's go ahead and jump over to the science, and we'll take a look at that. All right, here we are on my science character. Let's go ahead and get a look at her skill tree. I'm really liking the vanity shield on this the ship quite a bit. I've just started messing around with the Vern. I've been using the Titan. I'll be doing actually a video on the Titan here pretty soon. That ship is just a workhorse across the board. But this is an excellent ship. I'm still kind of fleshing out the build on it, so don't pay a ton of attention to that. Let's go ahead and look at the skill tree. All right. So you will find some similarities across pretty much all of the builds and the different focuses. I don't want to call them the different classes or whatever, because you have your engineering, your science, and those kinds of things. But that doesn't make a big difference. I mean, it can matter depending on kind of the very specific thing you want to do. If you're running a support build, you're going to want to probably be science or tactical, right? Engineer, it's good for tanking, but you can tank with any of the classes. You can DPS with any of the classes. Without getting too sidetracked there, though there's some similarities across pretty much all of ours. I make sure I get to at least Focus Fury, the base one, on pretty much every single skill tree. And so where I'll give up points is going to be on the targeting is where I'll start, or at the very end of readiness. I didn't really need much readiness because this is a science build, so it's more science oriented, so that wasn't as big of a deal. But some of these other ones, they help your team if you're running pets. These all make a very big difference here. Your critical chance, critical severity, that all makes a difference as well. Most science builds are going to be secondary Torp. Not most, but well, I'd say most, but not all of them. It doesn't have to be that way. So, taking projectile helps. Others that are doing, directed energy weapon builds on their science, you're going to want this as well. But at the end of the day, you're still going to want to have this Focus Fury clicky. So it's just a matter of what you can shave out of it. What all do you really need? On this particular one, I just went one into it for that Frenzy Assault. On the engineering, so we'll go by level here. So on our lieutenant level, engineering, I went 2 into hull, so this helps also with Tyler's duality and that crit chance, but you just don't need quite as much there. You do have to be careful with, science attracts a lot of threat, so having a little bit extra hit points helps, but it's not going to make that big of a difference. So having this last bit is not going to make the difference between blowing up and not blowing up. Again, I like to go fast, so we have everything in engines. Power transfer is huge. You need to be able to have that available to you. So again, similar to our catch-all. So on the science side of things, what's changed is we went full on our control expertise. We took the improved control expertise, and we also took the control amplification. So these are going to be this and this are going to be your main items for your science and damage ability. It probably wouldn't hurt to maybe go with some drain in here. So I mean, we could probably take some of like the power stuff here, these two, and put it into like drain expertise, and then we could go improve drain expertise. Drain infection, maybe. You can get a decent amount of electrical damage out of this. So if I were gonna redo this, I'd probably take 2 points out of these two here, and I would probably take another one out of tactical readiness and fill this in, and this would really kind of max that out. You'll notice on pretty much all the builds, there's going to be nothing in the shields or anything like that. If you are going to put something into shields, you're going to want to put those here in your shield hardness, okay? It's basically resistance for your shields. Otherwise, most NPCs are going to strip away your shields, and it's not going to do a lot for you, so I would not waste any points in that. So we're using the long-range targeting again, and it, again, your science build. Some of these, and on this one, I'm kind of working towards a pure science build. So I probably will be redoing this, but it's going to be somewhat specialties. So I don't have any tactical stations on here at all, right? So it's kind of a weird one. Oh, that's nice. Well, we'll just keep going here. It's kind of a weird one where you don't have any tactical. There's no tactical abilities that I'm using, and so with that being said, I would probably go a different direction on the skill tree. Now, again, that's kind of outside the box. It's kind of weird. So I would kind of, like I said, I would ignore this build. This is something I'm just still kind of flushing out. So this skill tree is gonna be your science catch-all, okay? As you go later on, if you create a science character, it's specific and you're going heavy, then you can start to manipulate this stuff a little bit to kind of fit that, like I was talking about just a moment ago, where I could kind of tweak it for the specific build. But most of all my other builds on this pure science character are not just pure science. They're torpedo, or they have beam arrays or whatever. And so these other things make a difference. So going with something like this is what I would call your catch-all science. It's going to take care of your science and any other kind of mixture that you're putting with that. Now, again, if you're going to go pure science, then we would probably look at changing this up a little bit to maximize it, although this will still work just fine. So that pretty much covers all in the science. I mean, you can kind of see where points are and you can read on these yourself. So again, I'm just kind of showing you what I'm using. I'm not going to go through each individual one and explain those. I mean, you can read through these yourself. They're pretty self-explanatory. And I think when you go through and kind of look at those, you can kind of get an idea of what you're dealing with there. All right, lastly, let's go ahead and jump over to my, my tanking character. This is going to be an engineer. Let's go ahead and switch. All right, here we are on my tank. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the skill tree. Again, we're going to see similarities here. This is almost identical to the catch-all tactical build. So you'll see the same exact setup for the tactical side here. There is still the long-range targeting. You're basically going to need that on everything. So basically what you see on this half of the screen right here is really your must for tactical or any kind of damage output. And a tank needs to be able to do that. It's not good enough for it just to survive. It needs to be able to pull threat, and it does that partially by putting out damage. And so it's important as a tank to still be doing enough damage to be not just getting the attention, but holding the attention. So the first half of this skill tree is really built around doing just that. Now, what's different here is we don't have anything coming down this first science line, and what we've done is we've entered points into hull regen. Okay, so I went double, or the 2 to the middle one on this, which is giving us an extra 42.5% hull regeneration. When we add that in with the Tilly Shield and Discovery Core and some of the other things on the ship with the traits and those kinds of things, these regen rates get huge. So you really don't need to go too much higher than that because you're only jumping another 8 points. So that really didn't make a lot of sense. Hull, same as our catch-all. This is giving us a lot more for Tyler's duality, and our overall hit points is a big deal on the tank. You need to have that pool along with some of the traits and things that I'm running. The hit points will get upwards of 200 and over 1,000 hit points. So every little bit extra in terms of your hit points on a tank is definitely going to matter. Same thing with the impulse. If you can't keep up with your team, then you are an ineffective tank. It doesn't matter how good your build is, how much threat you think you can grab. If you're not there, none of it matters. You need to be able to move fast. And so we fill in the complete on the impulse. Next, we have our flow. Again, same kind of setup there. We went full boat on the plating. So for your armor plating, this is huge. Resistance is everything. I mean, resistance is how fast those hit points are going to be taken away from you. So the more resistance you have, the slower those hit points are going to take away as are going to leave you as you're taking damage. We went full boat on the offensive subsystem. This is what I'm using for the tank. And to be honest, looking at this, I think this is a perfect beginner setup tactical build here. As you progress your build and get more traits and things like that, you can start to lose some of this survivability, because what happens is as you're able to do more damage, you need less survivability because things are dying longer. You don't have to stay in the fight as long. So that's generally what happens is you'll see things start to migrate away from resistance and those kinds of things. So this is what I'm running for tank. I would also highly recommend this for your beginner starter, put together. It's got the survivability and it's not sacrificing anything damage-wise. But it's not a catch-all. You're not going to do science in it or anything like that. You're not going to do supports and those kinds of things. This is a pure survive plus damage skill tree set here. So again, I would definitely recommend this. If you're a new player, this is what I would start with. And then as you're starting to develop your builds and what direction you're wanting to go, then you can go ahead and tweak it. This is what I'm using for my tank though, and I'm using this, in elite runs, supported runs where, there's only 4 of us and the top DPSer is doing 1.5 million and I'm taking in a lot of damage and not having any kind of problems. Now, the skill tree is a very small part, really, of your overall, build. At least when you start getting to the real high end. In the beginning, it does make a big difference. Some of these, threat controls that you get down here and your resistance ratings here, your hit points, these are huge. I mean, these are like, having extra consoles on your ship when you're dealing with stock and just entry-level consoles and some of the rep consoles only. So if you're a free-to-play player, dialing this in makes a big difference, and it's going to make a big difference. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope that was helpful. That wraps up the 3 main skill trees that I'm using. So just to recap, we did a catch-all that leaned towards heavy tactical. We did a science-oriented, and then we also did the tank skill tree, which also, like I said, could double as just a basic tactical starter with, that survivability in there, which is essentially what a tank is doing, right? It's doing damage and has the survivability. Let me know what you guys are running, what kind of adjustments you'd make. The skill tree is kind of one of those weird things, especially when you set it, it resets all your traits, and it's just a nightmare to do, So, build it up as you're leveling your character, try and dial it in, I think if you can get a good catch-all, if you're not running a lot of different toons, that's helpful, because if you have to change that around, it's a nightmare. It takes a while, it blows out all your traits, all your personal space traits. It just sucks to have to re-roll that. I do it every now and then. I'm probably about due, but generally when I do a skill tree, roll like that, I only do that once every 6 months or something, unless something huge changes either in the game or for myself. I try and roll with those for quite a while. You'll also find too, sometimes you'll adjust your skill tree and then you don't notice a big difference, or suddenly you feel like you're dying more, or you're not getting, as much damage. That's all in your head, okay? Keep playing it. Trust me, I've been there. I'm like that every single time. They can make a difference, but a lot of times what'll happen is you'll just psych yourself out when you start making those adjustments. You either, overestimated how big of a difference it would make, or you're, overemphasizing how big of a difference it makes. So it does make a difference, but you're generally not going to find huge differences from that, unless you just have stuff a complete mess, right? Especially if you have stuff not filled out on the tactical side and that's only halfway, that is going to make a big difference. So just bear that in mind. All right, guys, I really appreciate it. Let me know what you guys think. If the video was helpful, please consider hitting that sub button, ringing the bell. Again, check out the Patreon, check out the Discord server. Great community in there. If you have questions on this or anything else Star Trek Online related, we can help you out with that. So jump in the Discord server. Links for everything will be down in the description. Until next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And check out this video that I recommend, and also this video that YouTube recommends. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.